What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm going to be your host and producer for this afternoon, Logan Landers. And joining me, as always, is going to be Brandon Larson, our Big 12 expert here on the panel. Brandon, how you doing this afternoon, man, on this Veterans Day?
Doing great. Beautiful Tuesday. And yeah, like you said, want to shout out the veterans. We appreciate you guys because without you, we don't have the freedoms to talk about football each week. So
Yep,
today's for you guys.
you're right about that. And, we appreciate all those who have served across all the various branches across the military throughout the history of it. So we appreciate y'all for that. But before we get into the show today, be sure if you guys enjoy it, like, comment, share, subscribe. We go live each and every single week here on the channel on 100 Yards Football. And you can find us every week talking not just Big 12, but SEC, various other college athletics, as well as, of course, interviews with game's former players, coaches, referees, broadcasters, you name it. You can find it here on the channel. Just go in the description. We have a link where you should be able to find all of our content. As well as just scroll up and down Facebook. We have so much there. And, of course, we have our podcast as well, just audio versions of each and every one of our shows you see here on our platform. Well, Brandon, as you know, 4-game slate like we always do. We have been for many weeks now, and that is going to continue as we get closer and closer towards the end of the college football season, and specifically here in the Big 12. We are coming into this week number 12 overall, just a handful left as we get towards the end of the season. And we got a lot of solid matchups here to kick off the program. And up first, we've got a nice matchup between Arizona, the Wildcats, taking on the Cincinnati Bearcats. So Wildcats versus Bearcats in this one. Arizona comes into this matchup 6-3. All three losses have been in Big 12 play. In comparison to number 25 ranked Cincinnati, 7-2 on the season, 5-1 in Big 12 play. So, Brandon, let's get into it. I'm seeing here people are they're favoring Cincinnati in this matchup, and I would say for the most part, when you look at the season as a whole, I can see why they're leaning that way. But let's get your take on it and how you think this one's going to play out. Saturday at 12 o'clock kick. This one's going to be out there in Cincy. So, how do you like this ball game?
It's shaping up, and dude, I gotta say, I cannot believe we're at week 12.
I know. Blink and you miss it.
Yeah, the season's gone already, it seems like. But Big 12 is shaping up too. There's been some interesting turns. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster, I feel like, here at the end to see how everything shapes out. But yeah, as far as Arizona, Noah Fafita's looking pretty good. He had that last minute kind of comeback win. Last week. So they're coming off of a good win. It really seemed like their defense stepped up more than we've seen, just based on the low scoring that it was last week. Most of their games have been higher scoring. So I really, props to them on that. But ultimately the difference was their two-headed rushing attack between Fafita and Mondi. And I expect them to lean heavily into this game as well, especially watching the blueprint that Utah would have just laid for Cincinnati. I think if you can run the ball effectively and you stay consistent, they showed that Cincinnati's defense was very susceptible to that. So I think that'll be kind of the game plan. Arizona going into it, it's going to be run heavy, and it's going to be two really good quarterbacks, though, on both sides, kind of mobile dual threat quarterbacks, making plays. So I'm thinking a little more higher scoring, but, because on the flip side, you got Sorsby. He was balling out before he came into Utah. But again, as bad as that game was for them, it's a one loss. So they still control their own destiny. So that, a lot's still on the line with Cincinnati, that way. And, they're coming off the bye now, so they got the chance to regroup after what happened. And then, that's coming into it. It's not, they are hosting Arizona. It's not them going to Rice Eccles for the first time, because I think the combination between, elevation, home field advantage, and just because that was the first time Cincinnati had ever played Utah, like it was a matchup nightmare for them. And
yeah.
I don't feel as much of the case here. I really feel like it's back and forth. Both quarterbacks are going to be able to make plays in this game. But I kind of lean. I feel like I feel like Cincinnati has more on the line. They've got more to play for. So I lean that direction. I've got them winning a close one though. I got Cincinnati 31-28 over Arizona.
Yeah, this is a good matchup here. And, the game with Arizona and Kansas, just kind of going to talk with that one first. It could have easily been 23-24 final score, because we do know that Arizona did miss a field goal during that ball game. Kick went 2-3. So, and I mean, if you look at the stats, for the most part, I mean, they're neck and neck with everything. There is no, for the most part, the only area in which Kansas kind of dominated, and Kansas being the losing team also, mind you, was time of possession, where they dominated the clock in that regard. But Arizona, credit to them, like you said, very balanced approach in terms of their offense. You saw a good mix of run and pass with Fafita, 158, 2 touchdowns, kept it clean, no INTs. And for the running game, I mean, mostly, like I said, Mahdi was their primary back, but only had 7 carries. But a bunch of guys got down the action. Fafita ran it, 13 times scrambling. But as a team, as a collective, just under 30 carries for 165, average 5.7 as a unit. So, I mean, you'll take that any day, regardless of if it comes from, 2 guys, 3 guys, whoever. As a team, they got the job done. And, like I said, they're right there. They're only 5 yards away from tying Kansas in terms of the run department. And we know that, obviously Jalen Daniels is a tremendous dual threat, but Hishaw, he did good work as well in the backfield. Like I said, I mean, in terms of receiving game, nothing really stood out for Arizona. Everyone just kind of get on the action. That's what we talked about with the Arizona club, and why they are, how well they've done so far is because Fafita, he has, like I said, good weapons all around, and he utilizes them each and every ball game. You see multiple guys with 2, 3, 4 catches. It's rare that you see a guy get 7 catches for 109 yards, 2 touchdowns, something like that. You don't see that a ton with this club, but that's what makes them, I think, a good program, and a big reason as to why they beat a Kansas team that is a solid team, right? They were 5-4 going into last week's matchup, now 5-5, but Arizona proved just to be a little bit better in that ball game. Overall, I will say one thing they do need to work on if they do want to win this game this upcoming week against Cincinnati. You got to get pressures on the quarterback, and I say that because they finished with no sacks last week. You had 5 tackles for loss, 6 passes knocked down, which is good, but no sacks is crucial. And compare that to Kansas, who on the flip side were able to expose the O-line a little bit, get 5 sacks on the day. So that is, the battle in the trenches. That's what we always talk about, especially late in the season, is pivotal in who is going to win this ball game. Now, turn the clock, looking over at Cincinnati, and we're going to talk about Utah here later in the program, of course. But boy, it was not close at all, and kind of disappointing, honestly. I know you're happy with the final result, but I think
I expected a bigger. Yeah, I expected a game. I like, I like who, Utah to come out of it, but I expected way more of a game for sure.
Yeah, because like I said, since they're 7-2 now, which ties Utah. They improved to 7-2. And let's not forget, Cincinnati was higher ranked, and Utah just cleaned their clocks. And we'll talk more about their kind of offensive showing here in a a but in terms of just
they ran into a buzzsaw. That's all
they really did. But Sorsby, a lot to be desired for the quarterback. Just a bad day. 11 completions for 11 out of 33.
Yeah, that's not good.
That is not going to get it done. The running game, kind of like we just talked about with Arizona, there's about 15 guys, it feels like, who got the rock. But I will say overall that was positive for them. The passing game was rough, but the running game, they kept them in the ball game as much as you can. They at least tried to
they got to get their yards somewhere.
And we know that Cyrus Allen, he was the big winner. 2 catches.
Yeah, and that props to him. And I think that's the first one. That's the first one that Snowden truly gave up. I think if he did, he gave up. I can't remember if it was a touchdown or it was just a long drive, but like he slipped and gave up the one in Texas Tech, where this was like props to Cyrus Allen. He truly beat Snowden, and not many. Tyson didn't beat him. Chase Roberts didn't beat him. Like, not many good wide receivers have beat him. So it was impressive. Like, when that happened, I had to just shout it out to them. Like, there's a reason that dude has 10 touchdowns on the season. Like, he He knows how to take it to the house. And the move he put on Snowden, like he broke his ankles on that one. Like sometimes you lose that route and you hope your defense is out there. But when we put that guy out there 60% of the time, it's going to happen. But props to Allen, because I mean that was a hell of a play.
Yeah, and you got to give Cincinnati the benefit of the doubt here. As bad as they looked, and also too, we hadn't even touched on, they had 2 fumbles in that game. Sorsby had one as well, and Manny Covey had one. Just
he was under duress all night.
Yeah, just self-inflicted errors on them.
Yeah.
But one takeaway, like I said, obviously with Cyrus Allen doing some good work. They didn't give up a sack. They also did not have a sack. So that was their kind of one read. And also, too, Utah only kind of surprised that. We'll talk a little bit more. But only 1 tackle for loss the whole game. But, I mean, when you win 45-14, you're kind of nitpicking at that point. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to look and dissect at all of the
I'll throw out their game plan was quick passing. Sorsby didn't hold the ball long, and it, like, because if he did, like, the pass rush was right there. They were nipping at his heels. Like the pressures were there, and I would say they probably caused 10 of his incompletions were just based on errant throws that he just had to fire it because he knew the pressure was there. And so, props him not taking the sack, but also, I'll take no sacks with 10 errant throws.
Yeah, any day of the week that I will gladly take that. But for this matchup, I'm going to go with Cincinnati getting a bounce back win in this game. I think that they are going to look better. Like I said, everyone has off weeks. You see it in college football, obviously. And I think they just didn't bring their best. I think Arizona's going to put up a good fight. We've seen that all season long. But sure. I think ultimately I'm going to go with Cincinnati getting the W in this one. I'll go final score 28-21 in favor of the Bearcats. Now let's move on to our second game here on the docket. We got UCF with the Knights taking on the number 8 ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders. This game's going to be in there in Texas. And boy, if you're UCF, I mean, good right after just a game in which it should have went different. You feel, that's just not that's just the cruelty of college football sometimes.
Their defense finally steps up, and then their offense can't close the deal at the end.
Yep. And as we know for Texas Tech, 8-1 on the season. A lot of people peg them as making it far. Once we get around to the playoff time, like I said, they have that, kind of coveted at this point, 1 loss, like a lot of teams have at this point in the season. But after their loss to Arizona State, they have been back in control of their own destiny, including a huge win. And we'll talk a little bit more about the BYU side here in a little bit. 29-7 W against the Cougars, who are ranked number 7. Of course, we know last week we reviewed it. Number 8, number 7, clashing, and Texas Tech proved they were the better club. This game's going to be at 3:30. But Brandon, let's talk UCF. Do they have a fighting chance of this one? We know they took it to Houston, but weren't able to get the job done. Do you think their defense can put together another back-to-back weeks of good play?
The short answer, no. But I do got to shout out their defense. It seemed like they really did step up last week. We had been, the last few times we've talked about UCF, we kind of been like, hey, is their defense going to show up? And we'd even kind of been like, I feel like we'd seen what we'd seen from UCF, but I feel like we saw a little bit of a different side from them this game. They showed some fight they hadn't shown. It was who was it? Philip Dunham. He had 3 picks in that last game. So, like, shout out to him. 3 picks in a game. I'm pretty sure that's pretty elite company. Not many players, have that. Like, let alone some players don't even get 3 in the season. So, props to that. But I mean, they had 3 turnovers. I think they had 1 other fumble too. But they were able to generate turnovers this time, and they still couldn't come away with the win. It's not going to get much better. Honestly, like they had a fighting chance last week, but Tech is not Houston. That's for dang sure. I mean, like I said, unless their offense does a 180 of what they're doing, which, I mean, you look at it, I had to refresh this, but their quarterback's 5 TDs and 5 interceptions on the season. We're week 12 of college football. Like that, unless he doubles his production, and goes 5 TDs, no interceptions, I don't like I said, because Tech's going to score. They've proved it now that they're going to put points. I mean, BYU slowed them down because of all the times they stalled out in the red zone. But let's also be honest. I don't feel like UCF is BYU's defense. So if those aren't stalls out in the red zone and their touchdowns, that scores even a wider margin. So I that's kind of what I expect with UCF. And a couple things I will note though with Texas Tech, we got to watch. Morton's health. He seemed to be limping there at the end of the BYU game, and it was. I mean, you could almost say that you could have had the other dude in because it was kind of not quite mop up, but just you were handing it off to run the clock. But his health is very important based on they lost Hammond in the Arizona State game.
Yes.
So if he goes down again, they're now to their third string. Tech is an extremely good team on both sides of the ball, but that could really slow down their offense. And how well does the defense do if they're not getting extended drives from the offense? So that's something to watch. I gotta shout out Jacob Rodriguez. I'm a fan. I've kind of just been keeping up with him since he came to Utah. Made me a fan there, and then I've just been watching him here. And I mean, I'm over here watching the Niners hurt in that linebacker spot, and I'm like, oh man, I'm liking him in like a second to third round spot. Or we'll see because he's proven to be one heck of a linebacker. I think he's got like 7 forced fumbles on the season. I think if he had one more against BYU, it's 8. But he was a nightmare for Bear in that game. When you really break it down, they went straight at Bear and said, "You are not going to be the difference maker," and they made him beat him in the air, and that was ultimately the downfall. And I mean, master plan by Tech's defense. I even said it last week. I wanted BYU, but the outcome I wasn't surprised by, especially looking at the way like the numbers went, and especially with. I mean, they had the late interception, and then they also, I mean, the backwards pass was not even going to have to bring that one up, but then the muffed punt as well. And I remember like when that happened, I'm like, it's hard to win when you're muffing punts, in key games. Just ask the Utes because that was really the difference in why we lost to BYU. And then I was comparing it, and I'm like, the way Tech rolled Utah, like this game could be pretty lopsided, and that's how it ended up being. And I think it's just a credit to Tech. They're a heck of a team. I do see them making a deep run, but I think this is going to be a bit of a beatdown. I got them 42-7 over UCF. It's coming.
Yeah, I think the main thing with looking at last week's ball game with Houston and UCF, the battle of the pick sixes, basically, and just poor quarterback play all around. Because if you look at it, if UCF didn't throw their quarterback had 1 interception, that was returned to the house. If that wasn't the case, they would have won the ball game.
They won.
And meanwhile, you look at UCF, and you mentioned 3 interceptions in one game is kind of elite company. And I mean, he was, if it wasn't for look, I'll put it this way: if it wasn't for Philip Dunham, I don't know how close this game would have been.
It wouldn't have been. So that's what I was saying. He get 3 picks.
And I do not see him replicating that back-to-back weeks.
No,
even though he has moved up the draft boards already. Look, if he gets 6 picks in 2 games, I'm moving him up to first round.
Yeah. I was gonna say he's skyrocketing up draft boards at that point.
But I don't think that'll be the case.
Agreed.
It's look for UCF. They got to play the game of their life. If they win this one, it's going to be tough. Look, we know that
then some. I think.
Yeah, and that's but quarterback play got to have a great game. Running game, you have to be on point. If your running game is lackluster, you're not going to win. You don't have a chance of winning this ball game. I feel. Meanwhile, for Texas Tech, they ran over BYU 29-7, which is a good BYU team, mind you. We talked about them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Give them their only loss of the season, 8-1. And meanwhile, for Texas Tech, you mentioned Morton. He is a little bit banged up, but I still think that if he's just on the field, that's pretty much good enough for Texas Tech, just because of how good the rest of the team is. You mentioned Cam Dickey, their running back, had a phenomenal game against BYU. No one can stop him. Jacoby Williams as well. What a day he had. Averaged 5.9 yards per rush. And I mean, look, we've been singing the praises of the defense all year, and it's hard. It's just hard not to, as good as they are. Like I said, one sack on the day. 1 pick, 4 tackles for loss, 7 passes defended. I mean, so they are just swarming over the ball. And like I said, they rarely give up points. If they do, you get lucky.
But credit to them, they had the defensive personnel to force BYU into must-throw situations.
Yeah.
Because, like, you could say, did they put a blueprint on how to beat BYU? But it's like, it's easier said than done to just be like, oh, yeah, all you got to do is stop their run. Like, I mean, even Utah, they gave up 200 yards against them. So it's not that's not an easy task by any means, but it's credit to Tech that they were able to do that, stop their strength and force them into their weakness, really.
Yeah, but I'm going to agree with you. I think this one isn't going to be close. I just feel Texas Tech is head and shoulders above UCF at the moment. So I would go final score for this one. Let's go 34 for the Red Raiders, and I will go. I'll be generous. I'll give them 10 this week for UCF. I'll be nice here. I'll give them an extra field goal.
You think they're going to score as much as Utah did?
Which is saying something for this team, but I'll be generous and give them a few. I'll give them a couple.
That's fair. All
right, mentioned Utah taking on BYU not BYU, Baylor this weekend. BYU's coming up next. 7:00 kick for this one. Brandon, you get the floor first. Obviously, talk about Utah, what they're up to, and let's talk about your competition this week with the Baylor Bears.
Well, I mean, starting out, with Utah, they're coming off. I mean, they're coming off a bye week, so they got a chance to regroup and get healthy. But I mean, what a showing! Game day was there. It was big for the Big 12. They have in the past, the Utes have not shown up, or it's been a lackluster game on game day when they show up. So it was nice to see them put together a impressive game on all sides of the ball. I mean, they had the pass game going, they had running game going, which they always do. I mean, even special teams got involved. I guess they released a thing that like they were able to actually read Rice Eccles on like a quake meter, as far as like a decibel meter, like, or not decibel, but ground shake like reading during that punt return. So I thought that was kind of cool. But all sides of the ball getting involved, and this team is peaking at the right time, and this respect that they're actually getting from the national level, from the college football playoff committee, coming in ranked at 13. They're showing them that they acknowledge their resume. Our only 2 losses are to two top 10 teams. Though I don't know, we'll see where BYU ranks after that showing, because that's going to be kind of the question there. But it's going to be interesting this game coming into it. The DBs are going to have to be on their game, and I expect they're up for the challenge, but Robertson's going to challenge them. I mean, I had like a double check. I wrote this down to note it out, but I mean, the dude is at 2,700 yards on the season, 26 TDs, 7 interceptions. So, I mean, that is no easy task, but also, let's just put it this way: it's easier to run against the Utes than it is to pass against them right now. Like they're a stingy pass defense. I didn't look it up here recently. We've been sitting in roughly been around the Utes have been around top 10 in pass defense. So that's why a lot of people have been rushing more against them, because you got to get your yards somewhere.
Right.
But I kind of expect in this game trench dominance on both sides. I haven't seen from Baylor anything that tells me it's going to be they're going to be able to challenge like BYU or Texas Tech did to Utah. But it's going to be kind of big things going to be on Keaton Thomas, linebacker, and then Jacob Ray in the safety. They're going to be can they control the run game and contain it to force Dampier in pass situations, because similar to what Tech did to BYU last year, last week. That's kind of the formula. If you can't stop the run, you don't have a chance at stopping Utah, which is why I lean Utah this way. But it'll kind of come down. Robertson can be streaky, so if guys can start getting open, and if the DBs don't hold up to this passing attack, it could become a little bit more of a shootout. But that's kind of the way I see it in some of the key matchups. I mean, obviously John Henry Daly, the guys to watch for on defense.
Yeah.
I want to see him have a big sack game where he can catch up on a couple sacks, because I think now Tech is finally heading, or have they? When do they head to their bye week? Because he's chasing David Bailey in like sacks wise, and I didn't think Tech had their bye week, but maybe I need to go back and look, and maybe they did.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head when they have their bye.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting because Baylor isn't known for like a incredibly great offensive line, and Utah's D is going to get after it. So I think that's going to be really the deciding factor.
So I'm assuming here because the time's not listed. But for Texas Tech, mentioned obviously they got UCF. We just spoke about that. But their game against West Virginia is to be determined. I guess they're just trying to get everything figured out with that. So that's what I'm seeing here on ESPN. It's just to be determined. Looks like it's going to be November 29th. So they are going to get a bye week, it seems. They're going to play this week. They're going to be off next week. And they're going to go against West Virginia on the 29th. So they got a little bit of time. You got a little bit of time to get to them.
Yeah, no, but I was just wondering. That's what I was saying is that I didn't think that he had it yet, and he was only a sack or like a half a sack. I think it was. I gotta look on the numbers most recent, but he was chasing him, and I knew we'd already had a bye week, and now a second bye week actually. So
yeah,
it'll be an interesting shakeout to see, but that's kind of the way I see it playing out.
For this game, I'm curious to see, and obviously we know Baylor's coming off a bye week. Their last game was against UCF, so are they going to be refreshed or are they going to be a little bit off? It's hard to tell. But with BYU, you mentioned they have just good quarterback play in Robertson. I feel he's done. I don't feel like there's not a whole lot of coverage on him. Maybe just because of how the state of the team is. If I had
the rest of the team. Yeah. And correction, you said BYU, but you meant Baylor.
Yes. Excuse me. I've done that a few times already.
You're good.
But yeah, for Baylor, they've got a pretty stout, offense. I would say, guys to watch out for. But we always say, it's the defense for the most part is where you have to. Where I think Utah especially can kind of exploit them with Dampier and just how well he is. And I think I'll say this: I think Baylor will put up a good fight. We see that they can score points with kind of the best teams out there. In terms of lows, the lowest game they had this year for points was 20 against Cincinnati. In their loss, they got beat up by Cincinnati. So I think that they're going to get. I'll go final score for this one. Go ahead and throw it out there. I'll go with the Utes getting 38. I think y'all's offense going to look great today, or great against Baylor. I'll go 38-24. I think they can still. I think this will be kind of a first half game, and I say that because I think that they'll hang with y'all in the first two quarters, but after halftime, we know, what Utah can do. I mean, all season we've seen it, and
right.
They are definitely there for making halftime adjustments and just getting better after half the game's over. So I'll go with Utah getting the big win in this one. And I like Baylor. They got some good players, but as a team, I just don't think they're going to compete just yet. And if they do pull off an upset, then
it's an upset.
Those guys on notice. Got to put them on notice, especially this late into the season. As every game, as we're three, some teams 3 or so games left. Every win, every loss counts, and for a team like Utah, where you're on the outside right now looking in because you're number 13 of the top 12. You can't lose, basically, at this point. You got
to win out. You got to win out. Need chaos.
You need Texas Tech to fall, which I don't see that happening this week. And
I don't see us making the championship game, especially with BYU unable to beat Tech. I think BYU winning out was the most likely.
Okay.
But then I don't know, unless BYU is about to drop 2 of their remaining 3, which again I don't see it. The remaining team, like, it's going to be fights, but no one's Tech's defense, and that's really what kind of punched them in the face on that one. I honestly just think the Utes have to right their ship and then hope for kind of that last 12th at large spot that just based on resume and all the other teams around it. Because I mean, the two teams that are kind of competing, I mentioned it last week, but it was Texas and Oklahoma, and both of them, Texas has to play Georgia at Georgia, and Oklahoma's still got to play at Alabama. So I feel like you can chalk up one more loss to both of them. So it's probably, probably not making the Big 12 game, but I think being a at large, or not at large, but a 12th seed in the playoff isn't impossible.
No, it's definitely still obtainable, and it could happen. It could happen. We know a lot's going to get crazy here with a few weeks left in the season. All right, final game we have here on our preview show is going to be TCU and BYU. Well, talk a little bit about BYU and how they just weren't able to come up to the task. As for TCU, hoping to play spoiler at this point, hoping to kind of derail BYU and knock them out for good. And they got a good ball club. They got some good players over there. Let's talk about these teams. Let's go with the Horned Frogs first. Brandon, what do you like about them?
I mean, initially for both these teams too, I put bounce back question mark, because they're both coming off tough losses. TCU is a little closer. BYU was not pretty. We'll be honest. The things we can shout out on that would be the defensive side, but with TCU, it seemed like they were going to close out that game, and then they, what was it, that late turnover that pretty much ended it. They were driving to close it out, and then Iowa State got the late turnover, and that was the game there. And kind of looking at that matchup, I mean, it's going to be interesting seeing what is it, Hall, and I'm trying to remember the number 0. I can't think of his name now. But those two matching up, as far as Hoover and McAllister are going to try and stretch the field. They're going to extend it. They're going to take their shots, right? The TCU is not just going to try and run straight into the heart of this defense with BYU. So it's going to be interesting how they hold up there. And I mean, TCU, I think are in for a bit of a more stout defense than what they just faced in Iowa State. So I don't think they fare well in it, but it'll come down to, I mean, really, like I said, can Eric McAllister, can he create openings and get downfield? And if they are able to get behind this defense, then it could go a different direction. But that's kind of going to be the big thing to look for there with TCU. And then on the BYU side, same thing, bounce back game. You're coming off a bad loss that, I mean, there wasn't a lot to come out of and pat yourself on the back on it. Other than their defense kept them in it. Their red zone defense was incredible. I mean, that game could have been easily 35-40 plus, and still the 7, because their offense didn't show up, but man, their defense did. Their defense was there until the end. It was very similar. The way their defense showed up was similar to how the Utes showed up with Tech. Is once they were gassed, then it's kind of more, it broke open. The points started coming easier, but their defense definitely kept them in it. So that's where you got to look for Bear and Martin to get back on track that way. I think they do, because let's be honest, they're not running into the Texas Tech defense. It was a matchup nightmare for BYU. Really, I feel like the way Tech's strengths matched up with BYU's weaknesses, and it showed. So that's going to be kind of an interesting spot. And then on the flip side, Roberts and Kingston, can they get it going? Because TCU, on the same side, like I could see it going kind of shootout route, but I don't know. Like I said, I think their defense is way better than their offense at this point. Seeing their biggest test last week versus Tech. I mean, one side really showed up, and one showed more of its, I don't want to say lack of experience, but Bear looked like a freshman. And we'll see if if TCU has the same defense or has the ability to do that. Because again, it's easier said than done to just be like, yeah, all you got to do is stop Bear and Martin, because that's a tough combo.
Yeah, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, and that's why I got BYU winning a close one. I think it's gonna be a little more low scoring, but I got BYU 24, TCU 20.
See, I'm gonna go with the shootout route for this one. I want to. I think I want to see some good, just high action, a lot of yards, a lot of touchdown, drag them out football.
I like
And
that.
with the offensive firepower we have for both these clubs, and don't get me wrong, we love some defensive battles too, but I feel like we need a high scoring affair this late in the season to really kind of kick it into next year.
Right. I mean, all these defenses now in the Big 12, like remember when the Big 12 used to
Something's
be
got to crack
like
here. You know what I
there were
mean?
jokes.
Someone's got to show some signs of weakness late in the season.
Right.
And we hope that's just with all the field play, not with any injuries, of course. But I think, I will go with the Cougars getting a bounce back in this one. Look, obviously, besides their loss last week, they've looked great all year. And as they kind of come down to a opponent that I feel like they're better than across a lot, but I'm not saying by a lot, but they are just statistically for a lot of categories. I think the offense is good for the Cougars. We've talked about them. We've had them pretty much every week here on the show just because they've been so highly ranked, and we know what those guys can bring to the table each and every Saturday. And I think that's going to continue. But I think TCU. I think that that Hoover is and McAllister. Both those dudes are going to be just running at it like we always see. It's going to be tough to stop. But I'm going to go with the Cougars getting a win, bouncing back, and keeping their chances alive. They're in the just so crowded Big 12, and I think I'll go final score. I want this one to go all out for this. So let's go final score. High stakes here, Brandon. Let's go 45 to. Let's go 45-38. That sounds good to me. I want it just flat out. Let's get some points on the board, and hey, your best against my best, and for the defense. Sorry to do it for you, but this week, but sometimes I want to see just some football like that. But just kind of looking here, Brandon, before we wrap the show, just kind of the standings for the Big 12, right? And this is how it currently is. These are all conference play games and everything like that, but. Let's just go from the bottom up because we don't talk about too many teams on the bottom of the barrel, but we got to mention them here as we kind of round out the show for our Big 12 game previews and weekly roundup. So at the very bottom is the lowly, ever so lowly, Oklahoma State Cowboys, who I believe just fired their interim head coach today. So they are now on an interim head coach for the remainder of the season, and my goodness, they have some work to do there in the off season, in the transfer portal, in the recruitment. They got a lot. Colorado, 3-7 for them. Rough year for Dion and company. We mentioned UCF at 4-5. Yeah. West Virginia is 4-6. They've won 2 games in a row though. Kansas,
they found their quarterback. I think
they have. It took them a little bit. They got it. Kansas, good individual players, team wise, still working on it. 5-5. And then we get into kind of the pack here for just all out play. We've got Iowa State overall 6-4, but the reason they're so low, all 4 losses, Big 12 play. Kansas State Wildcats had 4-5 on the year, but they've had some good matchups. Baylor 5-4. We talked about them and the weapons they have. Got TCU. We got Arizona and Arizona State. All those teams are tied in terms of overall record. However, Arizona State's on top because they only have 2 losses. And looking at the 2-loss teams here conference-wise, you got Arizona State followed up by Utah. Utah 7-2. You have that. And Houston is still above in terms of conference wins because they have 5. They're 5-2 compared to Utah being 4-2 at this point in time. Also, Houston 8-2 of the year compared to Utah 7-2. But what more can you do? You play the games you got. Cincinnati currently 7-2 as well, 5-1 in conference play. And up top, we've got BYU, the Cougars, 8-1, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders at 9-1. So, I mean, there's at least 7-8 teams that you look at that, and if a couple things would have went different earlier in the season, it could be a whole different. But that just kind of shows you the competitiveness in the conference as a whole. And we're glad that it's finally getting some more highlights and recognition this year during college football season. But Brandon, let's get your final thoughts here today on the show. Anything else you want to get out before we head on out for the rest of the day and get into our weekend and watch the Big 12 football ourselves?
I realized I actually didn't I don't think I gave my score prediction on the Utah Baylor.
Let's go for it.
You had said that, the lowest scoring, they were 20 against Cincinnati's defense. We're not Cincinnati's defense. I got Utah 35, Baylor 13.
Okay.
I think they figure out a couple of things, but like you said, the Utes adjustments and second half adjustments specifically. Once you it's kind of like once you show me how you're trying to attack the Utes, they'll usually have an answer in that way. Like I point to the Cincinnati game, they got one on the ground with Sorsey being a dual threat, and then they got the Cyrus Allen wide receiver, long touchdown, and it was kind of like once we saw what you were trying to do game plan wise, it was shut down, and I expect the same. But other than that, I'm excited for it, and this roller coaster of a ride or the end of the season is going to be fun to watch the Big 12 shake out and on into the playoffs.
Yep, and of course, we'll be here next week talking about all of the games as we get closer and closer towards the end of the season. Brandon Larson, my co-host today. Thank you, as always, coming on here talking some Big 12 football. I've been your host and producer for the show, Logan Landers. Once again, if you enjoyed the episode, like, comment, share, and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. Also, go and download our podcast and give us a rating on there as well. So, until next week, we'll talk to you guys again on our episode here, talking about the Big 12 Weekly Roundup and game previews. Until then, enjoy the rest of your night.